Thank you everybody for joining us today and spending your time during your lunch hour, depending what time zone you're in. I did find it interesting and sort of exciting that there's folks from 18 different states joining us today, so that's exciting and impressive. So again, thank you for joining us. So we're gonna spend today's little less than an hour, if you will, going over basically our visualization services, explaining them what we offer and how we can help you. We're going to show a little bit of tips and tricks for creating visualizations, and then we're going to also just talk about taking them to the next level as far as look and feel and appearance and stuff. We're going to do a little bit of audience participation with some poll questions just to get some feedback and information from you all. And we're going to look at a couple different projects, project highlights that we've done in the past to give you a look and a feel of what we've done. Also some example renderings, and then we'll wrap it up with some Q&A towards the end, just to get some questions that you may have that Mark mentioned about adding into the chat pane there. So looking at our visualization services, what do we do? Well, we create and provide renderings, animations, virtual reality, interactive type modeling experiences, and also 3D models from your designs. And what that really does, or what that really means, is sending us your files, your models. You can't maybe do them in-house, or you have timeline constrictions or something, or maybe that the in-house talent doesn't have that ability. We can produce those images for you, and whether it's a still rendering, as I mentioned, or it's some sort of full-on immersion sort of virtual reality piece. So what that really means is we want to create these stunning visualizations and renderings, so you're not tied up doing those in-house. And I have a lot of slides, a lot of pictures, a lot of images in here to show you, so a reference point. So I can kind of explain what we do all day long, but showing you some images is one way to really do that. And hopefully this is an example and an image in here. But ultimately, we work with you to scope, to manage, and produce those impressive photorealistic images for your projects, for your clients, so you can really convey your ideas. Now, what that really includes is a variety of different things, whether it's just the still photos, the kind of video fly through, if you will, virtual reality, the VR. You've probably heard about that or seen some different stuff. I'm going to explain that a little bit more. And also I mentioned about the interactive immersion type stuff, kind of that first person gaming and the ultimate modeling. So when we talk about the VR side of things and what we can offer and get into is basically that immersion level. Once we have a model or design that we've created, we can have many different outputs of that. And one of those is this VR type of environment. And that's to really provide that immersion, that kind of, really getting into it. What some people have called it, caving environment, or you're wearing gloves and you're touching, feeling. This image we're showing has the wands to kind of control different stuff, but you're wearing the goggles. It's very interactive, first person moving through stuff, and it's free range. Like you can go anywhere you want to. It's not a set specific path, which is some of the animations we've done in the past. But also that can be a stationary type of thing where it's a panorama, spin around as well. So we've also gotten into some more augmented reality where we're kind of blurring the lines, if you will, between the model and the physical space as well. So those are some other areas we can get into. Now, I've had some folks sort of ask in the past, like what, I do certain type of work. Does that apply? Can you produce images for us? And really the answer is it's really applicable to all industries across the board. Whether you're an architect, you're a designer, you're in engineering, you're in construction or manufacturing, civil fabrication, or just across the board. Also, like we've had a lot of general contractors approaching us saying, hey, we want to understand what this space looks like. Interiors and ultimate designers as well. We've done work for, even for tenant upfit spaces. And more recently, some landscaping, exterior type, really getting into the planting and kind of stuff. So that's been fun, but also just to convey and share that with everybody, it's really applicable to any any industry, because if you have a design or an idea or a concept and you need to convey that, sometimes the floor plans or the drafting views, if you will, don't really show that, and these images help to convey that or kind of kick that over. And I have a comparison kind of thing here to show. This is actually a photograph of, talking about different industries. This is a millwork cabinet company, and they take photos and they build these mock sets and these one-off, cabinets, if you will, and decorate it up and make it look great, take a photo shoot, and then tear it apart. But we approached them and said, well, what if we 3D model that for you? So the image on the right is from a 3D model rendering, kind of trying to match similar to, generally similar to what they're showing. But the great thing about that is we then had this digital model that we could do several different scenarios and different changes and assets to the point of putting different finishes, materials, almost some design options where we could switch out colors. A lighter color to a darker color, different floor, change up the scenario, and even making the wood very light or something. So this was an opportunity to really show we can make those changes and not spend this huge amount of money up front to build these mock-ups, if you will. That this was a way to have these digital assets show in marketing materials, but also change and really get it, take pictures from any angle if you wanted to. Now, we work with you. Some people are like, well, how does this process work? We really look at the scope, schedule, and budget. And ultimately what that means is, what do you need? Because that's different for every person, right? You might, I just need this quick image to show the design, or it could be very involved as far as an animation and images and multiple shots or different design options. That's important too. When do you need it? We've, the earlier we can get involved with you, the better, and the more time we're going to have, because we have folks who typically like, I need it, 2 days from now, and we should have done it earlier. We knew this was part of the contract, whatever. But when you need it is important to us, that we can get it prepared for you. And ultimately, how much is it going to cost? That's always a big concern, which it should be, right? But we've positioned ourselves to be very competitive in the market, especially competing with, the offshore and, outsourcing type of places that people go to typically. But we're here, we're local, we understand the industry, the techniques, what you're looking for, and less communication gaps, that kind of thing. So we've positioned ourselves so we can be competitive in that market as well. And these are all further details we can get into, but just from a high level point, I wanted to share that stuff. Now, we also have discussions when we're kind of going through this process, because everybody has different opinions and views as far as what is involved in a model, or what information should we be showing. Is it every nut and bolt? And everybody has a different opinion. If we asked everybody here what a rendering should look like, they're going to have different opinions in grainy or cartoony or photorealistic type level. So we've sort of taken the LODs, the level of development from BIM modeling and what's involved in that model. And when we go through and scope out a project, we actually define these specific levels with you and what your client may want, to define what's involved in that. Is it a LOD 100? It's just the model itself, okay? Is it then going up? And you can see how these start to kind of build on each other. Hey, we're adding materials, we're putting in shadows, we're putting in lighting, we're adding reflection and ray trace, radiosity type stuff, high resolution. So all these sort of break down into equaling for you, on your side, it's an LOD 400, that's going to take this much time and cost this much. Those are important pieces to deal with and to know. So we go through a very specific process, even defining what is it that you want to see, what is the camera shot, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later and some tips and tricks. But so everybody's on the same page as far as what you would get in the end. We've also sort of culminated and taken a lot of those separate individual type of assets or images, like a rendering or an animation, the fly-throughs and stuff, and made them more of an interactive experience. And like, it could be a web or a weblet, embedded in your website or on a flash drive or something, but basically to share and convey to a client, you know, the intentions of what you're designing for them. In this case I'm showing here, it actually was for a condo unit that they were pre-selling down at the beach. So they wanted to have all these assets because there was nothing built. So instead of just saying, here, we created these renderings for you, you know, for a client, good luck and run with them, we created all these individual assets, but then wrapped them in this little web experience where they could click through the different scenes and shots. There actually was some iterations of different finishes to choose from, moving through the animation of the interior spaces, different units, and then also an exterior shots as well. So, you know, those are some, taking those pieces individually and kind of culminating them together as really one big deliverable, if you will. But our goal, oh, I'm sorry, I clicked the head there. Our goal is to make these stunning and impressive photorealistic visual assets for you, so you can shine and show off your ideas and concepts to your clients and basically attract more work. It's ultimately want to do for you. And so whether it's just initial renderings or all the way through full animations and full VR, that is our goal. That's what we want to do, and that's what we can offer with these new services. And have been very excited to offer it and get involved with folks in their projects. So I'm going to kick over to Mark for our first poll question, because I'd like to hear some feedback from you all and get some interaction. Make sure you're staying awake out there as well. So Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you for our poll question.
Sure, thanks, E. So we have several poll questions today, and so I'm going to launch it here. So we appreciate your feedback. So you should be able to see that on your screen now. Simple question: who creates visualizations at your company? We have a lot of VR people or BIM managers on the call. So just I do, another employee. We outsource it, as you mentioned, a couple of those, and then fourth option is we do not produce any visualizations as of now. So I'm checking the results for getting close to getting everybody voted. Wait a few seconds here to give you your opportunity to get that in there. Okay, looks like it's steadied or closed off. I'm going to close the poll here and then share the results with you. So you can see here, again, a lot of people on the line, you create your own visualizations, and then other people have, you know, the variety of them, and there's a small group, again, 19% that don't produce visualizations as of right now. So that's what I have. I'm going to turn it back to you, Z.
All right, thanks, Mark. That's awesome. And sort of as we expected, you're listening or watching this webinar because you're the one who's probably doing it and want to learn a little bit more or see what we can offer, that kind of thing. I'm interested in the folks who don't produce it and, you know, maybe why at some point, but we'll get to that eventually. I want to go through just a project highlight example of things we've produced and the assets and the process involved with them. Again, this is all imagery and visual type stuff, so this is a good start. So this is an example of a project we did a couple years ago. It's actually for a church in addition in North Carolina, and you can see there's sort of this bubble type structure behind it or whatever, but they're really looking to, you know, what is this going to look like when we're said and done? Because, you know, is this going to be this weird, you know, beach ball looking thing in the background? You know, we need to convey that to our folks who are helping to fund and pay for this. So we got involved in the project to produce these different assets. But when we started out, we just had flat 2D AutoCAD, you know, drawings, nothing special. You know, we had to build and model and generate that stuff, which is, you know, if the 56 who, you know, % of the folks are on the call, you know that you have to build and create that stuff. And that's exactly what we did. But we also got reference, you know, satellite imagery type stuff and started to develop the model associated with that. And this might be a little bit out of order, but we actually were able to develop that model and develop the entire project and actually create additional assets. So a lot of times folks are like, well, you got a rendering, hey, that's great, that's it. Well, there's so much more once you have that produced, what else we can show and view and share with folks. So this is obviously a above top site plan. A lot of folks would look at this and say, oh, cool, that's Photoshop, right? No, it's actually a top view camera down shot of the site rendered out. And basically, this might be a little pixelated coming across in your end, but basically, zooming in a little bit, showing what that design or what that space looked like. So it was nice to be able to provide that as additional assets. But as we developed the building, the model, we had to extrude everything out and create it, and then started to develop that out, doing some color example palettes, if you will, like what is that going to look like? What if we put the true light from the sun onto that space? So we're starting to do a little design, an analysis, if you will, on what the colors and how they reflect with sunlight and stuff on there. And that was helpful. Those were just studies to a certain degree, but because they only had 2D flat elevations, once we developed that model, we were able to place the camera in there, which was really awesome. And then here, just literally screen grab from 3ds Max as kind of the working model to kind of get an idea of the different faces and what's involved with that in developing that out. But even while we're in here, we're starting to apply materials and finishes and how things are going to look, and then ultimately rendered out several different images that they were able to share with the congregation, the folks who are going to be paying for this capital funding to build this. In the these odd structures in the back, it's important to show how they looked and what kind of landscaping and foliage were going to be around there. And then off to the side was this huge parking lot in the foreground here. How does that all look? A lot of us are in the design industry where we can visualize and can see that in our mind, but showing that off to someone else, it usually has a challenge. And they actually wanted to look at some different scenarios where there's different picnicking area, kind of hanging out area, and what if we did a playground in that spot? That'd be a great place for it. So we're able to put that in there. What does that look like contextually? Maybe sight lines and security kind of stuff. So these are all kind of value adds that we were able to incorporate into that. So again, some sort of bigger overhead shots, looking at it, zooming in. Again, these are all just different visual assets that we were able to create. And there's actually kind of an overlay of the built environment of what that ultimately looked like. So that was encouraging to be able to be involved in that process, to share that and convey that to folks who really didn't understand it, and to really see in the end what their project was going to ultimately look like. So again, just sharing an example of what visually and quality and what you can produce and what the different assets are available. But I want to move into talking about some tips and tricks. So some of you are like, hey, I do this stuff all day, or we outsource it or whatever. Maybe we can change your mind on that. But I want to share some tips and tricks, and some of those come into time saving specific things, because when you're modeling, you can, and some of you probably know a lot of this stuff, but you can very much overdo it, right? You only want to model what is specifically necessary. And I have an image I'm going to show here a little bit later, but basically, you don't need to model the backside of the building if you're only doing the front shot, right? So that's why when we sit down with folks and say, well, where do you want a perspective shot from, or what do we want to include? Because the more we have to model or create, or just you in general or whatever, you're going to be spending more time doing that, and it might not ever be seen, and it's just additional time that you don't need to be doing it. So really determining what your specific shot's going to be, what you're going to model, is important. And then, as I mentioned, determining the specific shot and what is going to be specifically seen. And this is a good example of a movie set, and you can see these buildings behind these facades of these buildings are just the wood or metal structures keeping them up. But from the right camera angle, you'd never see that, and you'd never know that. And that's a lot of times what we do for creating these models, and that's a time saver, right? For not only the person modeling it, but for the fee or for the cost of the overall project itself. And you just don't need to create extra things that you're not going to ever see or produce. Now, in the case of that project I just showed you, we knew we were going to show from different angles, so that was really important to adjust and to see that from those directions. So just knowing what you need to model. Or on the reverse side, you don't want to ultimately have to come back and they ask for shot from the backside and you say, we didn't model that. Obviously, that's not good. So determining what you need to do up front is important. Now, I'm not sure what the group maybe uses that's on the call here as far as software, but there's something, a lot of times we use 3ds Max. We also use Revit, or we'll even use other files from other, 2D AutoCAD, that kind of stuff. But one thing I've learned, and I thought like a lot of people knew this or whatever, but there's something in 3ds Max called this backface culling. And you say, what in the world? I don't even know what that means. That's like ridiculous. I tried to highlight it here. Basically, there's a little checkbox that says backface culling. And if you think about a camera shot that you're looking at in a view, or some of those screens I showed you of where the camera's looking at the object, this backface culling, if it's turned on, will actually render both sides of an object. So just even imagine a wall that you're looking at, and you want it to process and go as fast as possible. So with that being checked, it'll actually double and do the back side of the wall and stuff you don't even see, or that's internal to the wall. So you can have a rendering, and we get this a lot from folks that said, oh my gosh, my renderings are taking so long to produce. Why is it taking an hour, 30 minutes, whatever it may be? And we've done some investigation and found out that this backface culling was turned on. And that really literally can double the amount of time it takes to do that. Now, if you're not using 3ds Max, it's maybe not as important, but you running into folks who are venturing into that direction because that's a much better quality than what Revit can produce. This is something that gets turned on, and it gets turned on early in the process inadvertently, because imagine a square box and you're spinning it around and you're like, wow, it looks like the top is gone or something. Well, there's, not to get into huge detail on this, but there's something called normals, and it like, what is the outside facing direction, and sometimes those get flipped around, so people will turn on that backface culling to show it, right? And they think, great, now I can see all the sides, but forget down the road that that's now going to really bog down their system to process that. So just sharing that a little bit with you, you might be like, oh, hey, that's helpful, and ultimately it's going to help, like I said, reduce that rendering time. Now, if you are using like a Revit type environment, there's some great, great assets you can produce from that. One thing I'd look at is more of this network rendering farm, if you will. And I say that sort of lightly in Revit, because they do have this render in the cloud, and we still kind of consider that a render farm because it's up in the cloud and it's processing a lot of stuff at the same time. And we have folks who on their computers are like, it just does not have the horsepower to render this stuff. So hey, let's move that to process it in the cloud, and it's going to be faster. There's like credits and stuff it takes to process them, but compared to your local machine, it's night and day as far as speed. I have seen some different results with like reflections and stuff, but I would definitely consider using that render cloud. Or we could spend an hour talking about just rendering in the cloud, or this next one, which is Revit Live. You can see the Go Live there button, and that's basically an online type of gaming engine processing that is producing it as well. So those are some great tools available for you. Again, some of you have maybe already experimented or gone down that road, but those are really helpful in producing better quality imagery type stuff, especially if you're still using a Revit. Now, another tip, if you will, using like a 3ds Max, there's different rendering engines built into that. And 3ds Max this year introduced this Arnold rendering engine and took out Mental Ray, and which is just a different process of how it approaches it, how it does the imagery and does the reflections and that kind of stuff. But there are other ones built in here that can produce some nice results. There's also third party like V-Ray, that's a add-on type of stuff, and folks have had different opinions about which one is better to produce different shadows and reflections, that kind of stuff. But just know that there's choices and options out there. A lot of people, I think, just go, okay, I'm going to render, and I hit the render button, and I'm using it on my computer, and I don't even think about it. But ultimately, there are more choices out there. There are what we're calling the built-in rendering, or the ability to render up in the cloud through the application, through this Revit Live that I was just mentioning. And then, there are other network rendering farms. You don't have to build or produce one internally, which is great if you have those assets to do that. You can tie up 10 or 100 machines, whatever, to render those locally. But there are outsourced or network, out on the internet type of rendering farms. You basically upload your files to it, and I just I've used Rebus and a couple of these other ones before, but they do a really good job. All these do basically rendering that off-site for you in the cloud, in telling you what the turnaround time is going to be, and you pay a fee or whatever and push it out there. So you're not even just restricted to what's available in your local software or the cloud ties that it has, but also, there's third-party applications or third-party, companies out there on the internet who can process that information, excuse me, for you as well. Again, just sharing some little tips and tricks and things over time, of ran across, if you will. All right, let me go back and kind of mention or talk about some of this workflow type of stuff in how we maybe develop this stuff out, and then I'll touch back on a couple more tips and tricks. But this was just a recent project that we had been working on, 2D type flat plan stuff, just a basic elevation, and the client said, hey, we really need a cool image rendering. The flat 2D elevation just doesn't do it. So going through the process of building a model, and we do a lot of iteration back and forth with our clients, with folks like you, to make sure we're on the right page, basically, and we're not going down a path and modeling something that's ridiculous or not even what you thought it was supposed to be, or maybe it wasn't documented that well. So we start developing these models, and then just putting a gray sort of undertone across them to really, look at the features and what's created. So how detailed are those window mullions supposed to be? What level of detail did we agree upon? Does the site need to be more softened or shadowed or something? So really removing the idea, and that's maybe a little tip or trick for you if you're the one doing the rendering. Render stuff as just black and white, or gray tone. So you're not focused in on, hey, that brick color is wrong, but let's look at, are you showing the details? Or do we want to show the joint reveals? All those kind of things. Moving forward, though, we can start, okay, let's apply some basic colors. And this is obviously very cartoony, very draft sort of level. Just, do we have the right camera angle? Again, we're going, this is a, round robin process. We're sending multiple images. And I know a lot of times people don't like to share their, their in progress, an unfinished painting until the very end, but you have to, kind of let that go so we can, we're making sure you're on the right page, if you will. So then we, starting to add some little shadows and color and effect, and it's still sort of washed out. And, now we're starting to develop this in now we have some site information. Again, we're starting to convey the idea a little bit better, a little bit more realistically. Building's still sort of gray washed out, but we're seeing how the light is reflecting through the windows. We're starting to understand it, starting to look a little bit, more believable. Here's just another shot, looking at, adding more materials as the color and the depth. And a lot of times we found out that the material color is actually too light, and having to explain that's really what it looks like with the sun hitting it. And then that's a hard conversation to have. But even though we're only supposed to just produce the image, but we'd have to tweak it and fake it, if you will. So here's really a more complete, excuse me, sort of finished, some trees in the background, landscaping. There's some more detail to be added to this one. It's actually still a work in progress, if you will, but it's starting to look believable. It's starting to look real. We're seeing shadows, we're seeing reflections. You're looking and saying, I believe this. I can understand it. I can see it. I know what's going on. I can really, believe I could be standing there or something. So again, just kind of going through process, if you will, and that some of the tips or tricks is sort of spun in there, but really how we develop things and share that with you, and so you can potentially share those images as progress with your clients as well. So how do we take these renderings, or just in general, to the next level? ultimately. A lot of folks can produce a rendering. They're like, I did the camera shot, I did the rend. It just doesn't look that great, or there's something off, right? It doesn't. I don't like the way it generally looks. So I'm going to just discuss a couple. Um, I just discussed a couple. I want to discuss a couple topics here: materials, some lighting, reflections, and shadows, and they sort of intermingle with each other a little bit. So on materials, I got a little swatch here of some yard or grass or whatever you want to. Okay, as they're saying, my audio isn't maybe as loud. Hopefully, it's better. But a piece of sample of grass. This could be a digital photo somebody took, or it could be something produced within Photoshop. It just really depends. And I'm sure you've seen where there's a repeat. If you looked across the rendering and you see the open yard or something, and you see this patterning happening. So I basically had this swatch, and this is what the software does by default, is it does these repeat patterns, and you can, and hopefully you can see this okay, and you have to let me look a little more detailed. This is somewhat subtle, but you can see this vertical line. You can see that there's 7 different swatches here. That's because the repeat doesn't match up correctly, and it's a hard abrupt end, and then you start to see this like checkerboard effect, and you're distracted by that in the real rendering, and it just doesn't look good. So one thing that people need to realize or look at for that next level, or having that really good, is to blur those lines, or to not have that repeat pattern there so people are seeing it. And one way is, it's kind of hard to describe per se, and I have another example I'm going to show you too, but basically the all edges of this material, and when this material ends on the left, it needs to pick up where the right side is. So if you bent this around into a cylinder, when you touch those 2 ends together, they would match. I mean, like the grass would start and continue onto the other side. And that is something that can be done in Photoshop. You can actually take a digital image and reproduce it, because there's variations in here. You can see that this is actually real grass because there's some dead spots or whatever in here. But these edges actually match each other. So if I take that same image and bump them up against each other, so from a patterning standpoint, it looks like this continuation as opposed to that hard line. And those are simple things, but you notice it right away. Our mind is very sharp when we look at these images, and that's one way we can tell what's a good rendering. We talk about that next level. When you look at somebody's image, you're like, yeah, that's good, but I could do this and this. Everybody's a critic, but anyways, you can see where there's not that divide, there's not that line. It just sort of continues. The pattern continues on, because the way most all applications, doesn't matter if it's Autodesk or whoever, they repeat these patterns. They just like putting, almost like you'd lay down some sod, they'd put it in there that way. So another example to show that, excuse me, is using a brick, or some sort of like very repeatable type of pattern. And brick is a good example, where it's very uniform, it's very sized, same, and there's a very definition of where one product ends, and in this case there's a grout line. But again, if we bent this around and connected it like a cylinder, the ends would connect, or if we bent it the other direction around, it would connect as well. So I just took that pattern and repeated it, going to the next one, and it looks like it's one big brick wall with this kind of notch taken out of it. You can't really tell where that transition is. And I've had projects where we actually had to match a specific brick color of an existing building, where we went out there with a digital camera, measured how far away we were from the wall, made sure we were dead square on, had a really high, nice camera. Well, this was back before everybody had an iPhone or whatever, but took that picture and then brought it back, put it into Photoshop, and we actually started going through and actually had notched out the different brick patterns. That's pretty extensive. Nowadays, you can pretty much pull from a manufacturer's website and get a good pattern or a good material, but just being aware and being on top of it, that that's something easy to detect. And part of that's just the skill or process of knowing how these materials work and the size of them as well. You can never, these bricks are very specific in how the scale of them are. But that's definitely one, you know, from a material standpoint. The next I want to get into is just using this rendering we did a couple years ago as an example to look at lighting. And you might say, okay, well, actually it's an airport terminal, and it's like a terrazzo, you know, floor or whatever. But when we look at the light, there's a lot of lights actually going on in here, and that's one thing to consider is overlighting a space. So there's actually, if you look at, you know, on the left here, there's this, you know, windows, and there's actually a sun, a true daylight source coming in through the windows themselves to backlight this, and you can see there's some actually reflections on the floor in here. And then what you can't see up above, there's actually some clerestory windows, so that light is actually absorbing in as well. And then there's actually ceiling lights, right? And those are like a self-illuminating. And depending on your project, you may actually have to put the exact, you know, candle wick power lighting, you know, LED, you know, that it's going to actually show. And a lot of times people will just put in lights to you know, light up the space. But there's also these bar lights back here, which are self-illuminating to give this, you know, kind of design effect. So there's a lot of lights going on in here. And what you don't see actually behind some of these chairs and stuff are like a hidden light, or they call it just like a sort of like a backlighting, you know. It would be like almost like this free-floating light bulb emanating light, because in the real world, light comes in and it floods a room, and you know, you don't have these kind of scary dark corners. Well, in 3D models, a lot of times that happens. So I probably have a lot of extra lights in here than are actually, you know, truly in the design. If you think of the ceiling and the light bars and then the sun outside, there's other lights that are hidden in here, and those are to help fill the space. So when you talk about, hey, I'm having problems lighting it, it's dark, it doesn't look that great, you have to use these sort of indirect lights placed throughout your scene. They don't get rendered, so in theory I could have a light sort of hanging out right here in the middle, but a lot of times we're hiding them, because then it would actually put like a glow reflection on the floor or something. So just know a lot of times you're having these extra lights in here. Got another shot here looking down the hallway, different directions, sort of zooming in on it or whatever. But we can talk about some of the lights again. You can see those light bars glowing and actually putting light off onto the wall. And then you can see this the light coming through here. And really all this is to really trick our eye to believe, hey, this is potentially real. I mean, I believe it, but if it's something glowing weird or in the wrong direction, you tend to, your mind is smart enough in those 2 seconds to realize this is not real. So reflections and shadows is really sort of the next thing to address. Is you can see this is a highly polished terrazzo, you know, shiny floor with a unique pattern going through it, but a lot of these lights are reflecting, you know, down onto the floor itself. You can really overdo that sometimes and have it a little bit too shiny or too overdone. But the idea is that you would see that light, you would see those reflections, you would see those shadows. You know how even though this is really focusing on the light from the clerestory windows, we still have shadowing going on here. You can see shadows here, and again, there's a shadow underneath the soffit line. That's all happening that we see naturally in the real world. But if I had different lights and it was uplit, you know, it's like if somebody hand drew something, you can tell if it's off or distorted, right? So again, just some other tips and tricks, as if anything, even if you're not the one doing the modeling, to give you a sharper eye when it comes to, you know, why is this a good rendering, or what is the look I'm going for, or, you know, that light or reflection seems weird. Where is the shadows? Because you can soften up shadows as well. There's actually a rendering pass that you can do that actually creates sort of a shadow layer, if you will. That is there's a time saver for you too. It's called ambient occlusion. It saves time. It does a pass and remembers it. So one other tip and trick, and we'll keep moving on because I want to watch our time here, is I mentioned about 3ds Max, and that's what we heavily use. And you all may or may not have heard of this, something called Stingray. It's really like a gaming engine sort of environment that Autodesk had, and they're really starting to take that product and embed it into 3ds Max. And this was just sort of yesterday or the day before was announced, and it's a interactive real-time gaming engine, rendering engine, and it really is focused in on when we get into the VR side of things. So they call it now interactive within 3ds Max, but it's basically Stingray with this heavy VR component to it, where we're able to really get into more of this interactive stuff on the screen. And we've personally seen a lot of moving away from just, hey, we're just doing a rendering or that preset sort of animation path. And they're all good for their certain purposes, but we're seeing more people want to explore the space, be involved, in control of that space. And you know, I mentioned about, you know, VR and different stuff that can take different on different levels. Like it can just be on a screen. You don't have to always have goggles on, and you can be driving around, because some people get nauseous, right? But anyways, I wanted to, you know, just share that, you know, there's some really powerful tools in these products coming out that'll, you know, give us more features and functionality. Whether you do it or you want us to do it, you know, that's something we can sort of figure out from there. But it's ultimately giving this really immersive sort of VR experience. So I'm going to take a break for a second, let Mark take over and go to the poll questions, and just to get a little more feedback from you all. So Mark?
I'm here, thanks, Z. So I'm going to launch the second poll question. You should be able to see that up on your screen. Interested to see what, as far as your company, type of visualizations you're going to be looking to use in the future. You may be using some of these already, but interested specifically as far as what things you think that your company or you're interested in, you know, using in the future. Your choices are renderings, animations, virtual reality, and then the touched on was that augmented reality. Or, of course, you can choose all the above. So I'm just waiting for people to give a little bit of time to vote on that. We're getting a lot of people in two different categories here. Give you about 3 more seconds, and I'm going to close that out and then share the results. And here we go. I'm going to close that out. Thank you for your participation, and we'll share that with you. We see that a lot of people want all the above. They want everything: augmented, virtual, animations, renderings, and then the other category is rendering there. So, Z, back to you.
Awesome. Well, that's exciting to hear that people are really interested in all of the above. Like I said, the augmented reality or AR is really starting to be more desirable, if you will. But also with the VR, it's just an immersive kind of like we're in the real space. And everybody always thinks that inside, but you know, there's an outside element to that as well. So I want to run through just a couple other pictures and images of another project that we recently did. And again, you could think about the different stuff I said about shadows, reflections, and light. I mentioned about the materials and the repeat pattern, but I didn't get so much into the texture of it. Like these different carpet examples in here have their own pile height kind of patterning in them. It can really, you know, can really convey and see that depth of the different tiles, the different pattern, the different reliefs in them as well. So again, just some other examples of projects we've done, and how those are believable. The lights, the reflections, especially when you get into glass. You know, even that in this image here showing that the exterior building and trees outside. Okay, well, you'd expect to see something like that, not just the end of the world kind of falling off. I have a couple quick little articles here that I had found, because a lot of folks are like, well, we don't like to outsource, we're scared of it, or we don't like to do it. And again, just a couple articles that I came across, basically identifying, folks like us, outsourcing can be less expensive. It's definitely convenient, more convenient for you. and these are obviously full articles, we can give you the reference to them, talking about product visualization and using the software and helping the process, not just the 2D designs, but ultimately to see and convey that 3D element of the images for the client to really understand it. This is by 3D CAD World. And then there's this last one, which is Pixelate Creative, which is the ROI of outsourcing, renderings and images. And it's significant cost savings, and the need for these rendering services is growing, right? And obviously that's why we started doing this. We had a lot of folks, our clients, asking us, hey, do you know somebody who does this? Do you know, can you do this for us? And that's why we really formally launched doing this at the beginning of the year, and that's why we're sharing it with you all today. And some people say we don't do it, or some people say, yeah, we use this outsourced firm, but we run into some problems. So again, we're trying to share that, how we can help and assist you in the big picture and to produce these different images. And you saw some of the examples in there. And actually, we have one more poll question, and I'm really trying to be good on our time here, and we want to open up for questions here in a second. But Mark, let's do this next poll question to get some more feedback from the group here.
Okay, here will do. Again, here is a kind of question as far as analyzing your business decisions and what your thoughts are as far as visualizations and how you seeing it benefiting your business. And again, we have a variety of people on, from architects to design MEP firms. So your your needs may be a little bit different, but curious to find how you plan on using visualizations and how you see them benefiting your specific industry and situations. So from winning specific jobs as far as getting new work, from improving presentations to existing customers. So you have a job already, but you want to give a good presentation to them. Again, to design, showcase your design capabilities like marketing materials and things like that. Coordination of projects. Some people use visualizations just to make sure things are fitting together. And that last one is as far as clarifying design intent. So when you're looking at it, the architect may have looked at it, thought it looked this way, but it's not until you actually get in it do you see that it really is going to look like if things clash, match, or how it goes. So kind of that's how I envision the answers. Of course, Z has a lot more experience and he can touch on these. But waiting a few seconds here to close out the poll here, to see how you see using visualizations. Looks like we've got stable off here, so I'm going to close out the poll, and then I'm going to share the results here. You can see we've got a number of different categories where it's split across. And again, like 4 major categories there as far as how you see the using visualizations. So again, thank you for your participation. I'll turn it back to you, Z.
Awesome. Well, that's great that folks are really seeing this as a way to showcase their designs, their capabilities, if you will, and really highlight that. It doesn't look like anybody, or it was a very low number, talked about coordination of existing projects, and I guess that could be expanded out. Doing a rendering, sometimes you can see, oh, I didn't realize the ceiling or whatever is that low, or just that's really what the finishes look like or something. So we're seeing more, we're doing some iteration type renderings throughout the process instead of at the very beginning or at the very end, for the pretty picture, if you will, but they're more useful in functionality to really say, oh, that's a really dark color purple, yuck, we don't like that. But I'm glad to see that, they all kind of intermingle with each other, if you will. So awesome. All right. All right, so I just have a couple other images I want to share here with you. Then we'll move on and open it up to some questions. But ultimately, this is all pretty pictures. It's all imagery of highlighting your designs and showing off your capabilities, conveying that to your clients and what their either product design result is going to look like, and show off that this is a believable type thing. And we've had some fun in the past doing some unique projects that are a little bit off the beaten path, but then throwing a little twist in there saying, well, what if we showed that at night? What is the lighting going to look like for that space? and how is that going to be seen? It's like, oh wow, that gives it a total different flavor, total different feel. Or even doing different iterations. So basic kitchen design, wood materials, hey, what is that going to look like stainless steel? So almost some design options associated with that. Here, even getting into a little what we call motion blur. Again, maybe that's a tip and trick. You actually do that. Oops, I kind of went by fast, but actually blurring out the images themselves, and ultimately having that. Oh, I went black there, but having those images, using them from different angles, different shots, how we can produce a model but show it from several different angles to make it more interesting. And here, this is a historic preservation project, a lot of brick, heavy, renovation, putting new signage, different stuff on it, and then saying, well, hey, what does that look like at nighttime, just to get that look and feel that we are going for. So again, these services are offered, to you to help you all out. We mentioned renderings, animations, virtual reality, augmented reality type stuff. You can go look at our website, asti.com/visualization, to get some more information about what we can do, or you actually can email us or contact us. But I want to flip it over to answer some questions that I think some folks have sent in. So Mark, if you want to go through those questions, I'm trying really hard to not go over on my time. So we got about 5 minutes left, just to go over some questions from folks.
Okay, fantastic. Will do. Again, thank you for the presentation, Z. So let me just look at the questions here. So I got a question here. How long does a rendering take? How long does a rendering take?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a bit of a loaded question. If we backed up and looked at what the detail of the model is, what you're trying to show, what is provided, because all that sort of ties into the process, and obviously there's some time-saving, pieces in there. But we usually allow for, if it's just a still image, it could be a 5-minute process to render it, or it could be a half hour. It really depends. But there's a lot that goes into that, that final last couple minutes to make that image look the way it does. So it's a bit of a loaded question, but we've refined our process over the years, over the 15 some years I've been involved in doing this, to make things as efficient as possible, where we can crank out nice iterations of images pretty quickly. So it's sort of a politician answer, but it really depends is what it comes down to. But like I said, we try to be as fast as we can.
So you're going to run for office, Mike, with that politician answer?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So I know you mentioned a variety of different softwares, in our presentation, but what software do you use? Another question that came in.
So we mainly use 3ds Max, which is an Autodesk product, and that is for high-end photorealistic renderings and animations. That's a lot what the Hollywood studio type folks use as well, and it just gives us the greatest level of potential in capabilities in control over a model. Now, that doesn't mean we don't start with something else. You can natively model in that altogether, but a lot of times we'll get a AutoCAD file from somebody, or they have a Revit model, and we'll bring those in as the sort of the base of what we're going to create. But then we have to usually remodel some stuff in there, because those other software aren't focused on how we want to control the material and the different stuff. So, but 3ds Max is the main tool we use.
Okay, thank you for that. Jeff has a question now, it's kind of a follow-up to that. Again, encourage anybody else to have and put your questions in the questions thing, but Jeff, here's a question. What are your thoughts on rendering programs such as Lumion or Twin Motion?
Mm-hmm. I'm more familiar with Lumion, but I think some of that becomes a comfort level of maybe what you're used to using, and because some people can create great results with Lumion or any other product. I've seen some great stuff out of even AutoCAD of all things. So I think I'm not biased on any piece of software. I think it comes down to us internally, how we work on and what tools we're efficient with, and that's the ones we're going to use, because our end product, our deliverable is the asset, the image, the animation, the video, the the VR experience. So I'm not particularly promoting any type of software. It's just those are the tools that are most effective for us. And like I said, we actually I mentioned about using 3ds Max. We actually use V-Ray on top of that, which is for the rendering engine, and that's just because what we're comfortable with and what tools we can use. But my only, I guess, comment about Lumion is sometimes it looks, for lack of better terms, overlit. Like some of the materials or some of the objects look like they have a source of light within them. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's hard to explain, but easy to see. But I'm all for using anything, whatever's going to produce the best results. We're open for that.
Okay, I have another question here. I'll give one last question here. Let me find, I just misplaced it. For virtual reality, can we start with a Revit model that the customer or we provide?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's when we talk about our workflow, any of that in originating design application files we can use, and Revit is definitely one of those because it's already 3D modeled. We can pull that in to a 3ds Max, which has a direct link out to some of the VR software and applications. But it's not just a magic pill or bullet. We still have to redo a lot of stuff because the models are usually incomplete that we get from Revit because their focus is construction documents, even though they're producing a 3D model. So absolutely, I mean, we've taken stuff from a napkin sketch. I mean, literally a napkin sketch. But yeah, Revit's definitely part of that workflow that is helpful to save time and obviously ultimately the fees of a project as well.
Okay, thank you for the answer. So we're going to wrap this up. For my closing comments, anything that you meant to mention, Z, before we close it out?
No, other than the fact that we're here to offer these services to you all to help you save time, resources, and fees associated with it, so you can deliver these great images to your client and not be bogged down or tied up with having to internally do those or having to bring on staff, or hey, I have my regular day job to do with that as well. So let us talk to you some more down the road or after this, and would love to look at a project or even quote out a project for you. And you saw some of those examples. I probably had 20 to 30 other pictures I could have showed, but we're really here to help you all out is the big picture.